Hi, this is Nancy Duncan with Duncan Hears, and I have the great pleasure today of talking with Erika Lessa from Cooperation Canine. Most of you out there probably think of dog training and think of sit, stay, come, and giving a dog treats, teaching them party tricks, etc., which is all fun and great if your dog will do that. But some of us out there in the world have dogs that are a bit more difficult, and you really can't train things like sit, stay, come if we're worried on resource guarding or other issues. And so that's where Erika comes in. And so she's got several specialty certifications to do what she does. So, Erika, thanks for sitting in with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. This is really exciting. Glad to be
I
here.
know I'm so excited because I've met you, in passing as we've worked with my pup, but I'm fascinated and amazed by what you do because I'll be working with her and I think I'm doing great and making great progress. And you'll come in and be like, you see something I don't see. And then the minute you see it, you can't unsee it. So
Right?
talk to me about how you develop that skill. Is that something that's just been innate with you or
No, absolutely not. Nope.
okay,
I
I feel
was,
better,
yeah,
hopeful.
no, definitely not. Yep. I've always had dogs my whole life. And I mean, I'm sure you hear a lot of people that like, I've always had dogs my whole life. So I know how to do this and I know how to do that.
Right.
Um, I may have fallen under that umbrella. I'm not really sure. But what ended up happening with me is I adopted a dog from a shelter, my first rescue.
Mhm.
And the dog was 10 months old, and he became very aggressive very quickly after I got him into my home.
Yep.
I know you're going to be sharing my website. On that website, there is a short story about my journey with him. It's called Heal. His name was Colby, and he is the dog that actually got me onto this path.
Okay.
And all of my learning started at absolute ground zero. And so, in the course of acquiring the certifications and the specialties and the education, I started to really get interested in behavior modification, which is quite different than training. It's about dealing with the dogs on an emotional level.
Mhm.
So, changing emotional valences and changing the way that they respond to environmental conditions. Training is definitely a part of it, but behavior modification is definitely a different skill set. So it was something that I knew I was interested in right from the beginning. So after
Mhm.
Colby, it wasn't so much that I had aspirations of, doing like dog training or teaching group classes. I did all that in the course of my learning.
Mhm.
But I knew very, very clearly and very early that I wanted to deal with dogs on this emotional level. I even tried to actually go to vet school,
Mhm.
and I was like, I'm not interested in cutting these dogs open or what artery connects to what or understanding their ACLs. Like,
Yep.
I really don't. I
You
want
sound like
to
me. I
know,
actually went and applied, and then I was like, "Yeah, I can't afford this. I've already have a house and stuff, so I'll figure it out."
right? And then there was that, yeah.
Right.
That little small $100,000 price tag, yeah.
Yes.
So I kind of veered off and I was like, I'm really more interested about what they do and how they feel. Like I'm
Mhm.
such an emotion junkie when it comes to them and their capacity and their sensitivities. So I took off on kind of a self-designed educational path. So I started out with my certification in dog training because I do
Mhm.
think you need to know the basics of how dogs learn, how you teach voluntary or operant skills, how you really do get a dog to have a reliable sit or a reliable recall, which is really great.
Mhm.
I know teaching dogs how to sit is now become a little bit of a hot topic, so let's skip that one. But teaching a dog maybe how to station or how to wait for something or how to do a recall, like all of those things are very important skills. And even when I'm working with behavior, these tend to be foundational skills that I train for every dog that has behavior issues.
Mhm.
So the first thing was the training, and then the next step was to get a certification in behavior consulting, which is really an interesting kind of next step because you're going from teaching the dog how to do all these voluntary behaviors
Mhm.
to now entering this world where people feel like I think it's like a little bit puzzling, it's a little bit confusing, it's a little
Yep.
disorienting. Your dog is doing things, he's not responding to known cues. You don't understand why they're walking down the street and barking at another dog and can't sit because they know sit. You've taught them sit. You spent 6 months teaching them how to sit, and all of a sudden they won't sit.
Right, everything goes out the window.
It all goes out the window. And so that was all very fascinating to me. So my next little journey was to get a certification in behavior technology, which
Mhm.
is really about sitting down with the client, doing a functional assessment. So understanding one, what the behavior looks like, when is it happening, and what is the reinforcer for it. So
Mhm.
when people hear reinforcement, they think, oh, well, a reinforcer is when you give the dog a cookie after they do something. Yes, that is one reinforcer, but dogs are being reinforced all the time by the environment, by the effects of their own behavior. So reinforcement really drives all behavior, and reinforcement even drives aggression.
Mhm.
And so that can be a little confusing, and maybe we'll have time to kind of unpack that because it's a big one. But all behavior is supported by the reinforcement that the animal gets out of it.
Mhm. I would think the same was for humans when you're raising a child. It's the
Yeah.
same thing.
It's true. Well, and also let's talk about aggression for a second. So if a dog is threatened
Mhm.
by someone in their space and they bite the person and the person goes away, the removal of the threat is the reinforcer for the aggressive behavior.
Right.
So if somebody comes up to me in a bar and grabs me inappropriately and I punch them in the face and they go away, my violence has
Same
just
thing.
been reinforced with my feeling of safety and the removal of that threat.
Yeah.
So we're not all that different from our dogs. I think we just, because they don't have language, we don't really understand how to get in their head.
Mhm.
And then we kind of go down this rabbit hole of trying to like estimate what they're thinking or what their motivations are. But instead, to kind of circle back to your original question, if we all took some time to really start to educate ourselves about body language
Mhm.
and what indicators really give us the clue about what might be going on inside them, I think that's actually more accurate. So I could say, well, my dog was barking at the mailman, but I'm sure he just wanted to say hi. Well, I don't know that, right?
Right.
So if the dog is barking and he's loose and he's bouncy and the tail is like going side to side and the lips are flopping around and all that stuff, I can tell by that body language that greeting is likely the function of all of that behavior.
Right.
But if my dog is at the window barking with so much force that there's spit landing on the window and
Yep.
his body is an absolute straight line and his tail is up and high over his back and wagging like a flag and his eyes are big and his pupils are dilated, I will bet you my retirement savings the intention of that dog is not to go say hi,
Right.
but to try to either buy some time, or maybe he's frustrated by the barrier. But whatever's happening there is not a dog that feels safe. Let's just
Right.
put it that way, right?
Do you find that most issues that dogs seem to have stem from anxiety, fear, things of that nature?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question because fear, anxiety, and stress are at the root of probably 75% of the
Mhm.
cases that I see. But how that fear, anxiety, and stress develops is also very interesting, right? So some dogs can crawl out of the placenta fearful, anxious messes, and there is
Welcome to my Addie May.
so the genetic component is basically a profile that already includes maybe some extreme fear responses, something that you wouldn't see. Like if you took 100 puppies and you expose them to different stimuli, you may not see the extreme behaviors that you would see in some of these dogs that are just wired a little bit differently.
Yep.
So there's that, but then there's also dogs are not static beings, right? They're very dynamic and they're learning all the time. So they're learning what's safe and what's dangerous. And when they're puppies, they're collecting a lot of information. So if you have a dog that is, let's say, born to two very stable parents, they had a very good breeder, they did early socialization when the litter was together, they're picking good homes, they're breeding for ease of socialization and not physicality. Like you've got this situation where the likelihood is that there's some very solid dogs coming out of this litter.
Mhm.
You might expose one of those dogs to something like a wind-up toy that pops up. You might have half the litter go run over and wag its tail and be like, oh my God, what is that thing? That's so fun. And then you might have one little guy who runs in the corner and starts to shake,
Yep.
right? So there are these genetic meets learning history meets where that dog is now living.
Mhm.
And when you put all of this stuff together, you basically have your dog and its behavior.
Mhm.
So genetics, learning history, and current environment, and you can imagine the millions or billions or trillions or maybe an unmeasurable number of combinations in those three things give you this creature that is an individual who is going to perceive things as an individual and who's going to behave based on those three factors. And so our job, obviously, you know, genetics is a funny thing. I am not a genetics expert, but what I can tell you is that the best analogy that I heard that helps me is that each dog is born with a set of genetics akin to a set of piano keys. Mm-hmm. And then what they learn in their environment determines when those keys are pressed, in what order they're pressed, how hard they get pressed, how often they get pressed. Mm-hmm. And so those experiences start to help genes either express or not express themselves. So it is important, but the thing is, like, we don't build a genome for every dog that gets born, obviously. So right. You kind of have to work on just basically what you're seeing, how intense some of these responses are, how well behavior modification can work. Sometimes there's a play for medication to help some of that underlying physiology that's connected to who they are and what they've learned. Mm-hmm. So you can never, ever, ever tease apart who the dog genetically is and what they've learned and are continuing to learn as they're alive, yeah. Right? So it can get a little complex when you're trying to figure out so that's where you go back to the functional assessment. So functional assessments are designed to move away all of those overwhelming question marks and all of that, and just look at, here's the behavior, here is the topography of that behavior, so what it looks like, what it entails. Mm-hmm. Here is the event that it triggers that behavior every single time. Here is the reinforcer for that behavior. So then we can understand the function of what that dog is trying to do with that behavior. Mm-hmm. Once we figure that out, then the behavior plan becomes a little bit easier. So there's an Albert Einstein quote, right? He says, I could answer any question. If you have 55 minutes to figure out what the right question is, you can answer it in 5. So if I spend 55 minutes trying to build an accurate profile of that dog, and it is profiling on some level, if I can build an accurate profile of that dog and I can understand the function of its behavior, then the behavior plan will be very efficient in addressing what that behavior looks like and how we could potentially modify it.
Have you ever worked with a dog where the behaviors just didn't make sense, regardless of all your knowledge, regardless of,
yeah,
it's probably mine.
Yeah. No, I think with dogs like Addie, I think it does go back to their sensory perception of the world, mm-hmm. right? So, and we don't really know 100% what her first 4 months of her life on this earth looked like. And that first 4 months of a dog's life, and hopefully I can get this message out, is so critical in the development of that dog into adolescence and adulthood.
Here comes the real troublemaker in our family. It's Gladys Faye.
Hey, Gladys. So, so that's another piece, is that just because I don't have the answer doesn't mean there isn't one. It means that we haven't found it yet. And if I do stumble upon a dog where the behaviors look a little unclear to me, I do something called confirming a contingency. So basically what I'll do is, it looks like this is the contingency. It looks like this is the antecedent or the event that's in control of the behavior. This is what the behavior looks like, and this is the consequence of the behavior, and this is what's reinforcing it. So if I have a working theory, I might send the owner back and say, could you please do these 3 tests to confirm whether this is necessary in the set of conditions that trigger the behavior? Like, can we really see, like, is the dog guarding the owner, or is the dog guarding itself? Like, there's different things. Does the dog not want to leave the house because the owner is home, or is the dog fearful of leaving the house because he's fearful of leaving the house? So we kind of set up some additional contingencies to confirm whether or not we're moving in the right direction. And so for some of the more complex cases, that becomes important. And I don't know, like, I think if you are working with a certified behavior consultant, specifically through the IAABC, you are probably going to get somebody who is familiar with having those contingencies in play and being able to work through some of the variables to see if they can nail it down. Mm-hmm. I think that it's important to know that if your dog is struggling with certain problems, that finding the right professional to plug into that space is really important.
Yep.
And I'm gonna take a little bit of a right turn. I want to say this very clearly to everybody who's listening. If your dog is exhibiting problem behaviors, they are struggling.
Mm-hmm.
And what we don't want to do to a dog is struggling is add more danger to their world.
Yep.
So choke collars, prong collars, shock collars, punishment, air horns, yelling, correcting, all that does is prove to that dog that they have something additional to be concerned about on top of what it is they're already worried about.
Yeah. And it create this perfect storm. I know, we inadvertently did that with Addie Mae, and that she came to us a little nervous, but we said, oh, she's a shelter dog. She has to adapt. She has to get used to us. So we wanted to enrich her life and send her to daycare and take her to the dog park and take her to group training.
Yeah.
And she just got overstimulated, which led to some of her behaviors. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, for every great trainer like yourself, there's 10 behind you saying, nah, just use the shock collar or just spray air horns at them, which we were told to do. And knowing that we didn't know anything we did added to her stress and anxiety. So sometimes you're trying to go down that right road and you're just misled. So that's part of why I wanted to do this, because it's so easy to do.
It is. And I also want everybody to know that we had a little team meeting, me and the 3 people that work with me, actually 4 now. Yeah, 4. And we wanted to talk about our core values, and our core values that we have with one another and the core values that we have with our clients, 2-legged and 4-legged, are trust and connection. So that's what we came to as a group. So I want people to be able to trust that no matter what they bring us, they will not be judged for past decisions, because the people that peddle these solutions are very good at it. They couch it in a lot of language. And also, I want everybody to know that when you go and do this, you are doing it because you think it's the best thing for your dog.
Correct.
I can't judge that. I can't find fault with it. It's totally fine for you to step into that place. I did it with Colby, and that's part of my story as well. Yep. And when you do step in that place and you feel something not right, you need to step out of the place and then try to figure out what it is that, where, that next step that you need to take, right? Maya Angelou, you know better, you do better. So nobody gets blamed when they come to us. Nobody gets shamed when they come to us. I will, however, clinically point out if I think that that choice had an impact on their dog that we now need to unwind, because that's important, right? Because we know that adding these kind of aversive techniques and confrontational training methods runs the risk of putting the dog under chronic levels of stress and anxiety. And when your dog is under chronic levels on a daily basis, it will start to change them on a very physiological level. Again, I'm not a vet, so I can't really explain all of the nuances of how the brain changes when this happens, but we do know that chronic levels of stress stimulate brain areas, and then those brain areas have a hard time shutting down, and anxiety will impact threat assessment. So if you have a dog that was only scared of kids and you put a shock collar on it because it got, it started growling at kids, now it's starting to feel like the world is unsafe on a general, in a more general way, and you put that shock collar on them and they think that whatever's coming around that corner is not safe, whether it's a dog, a man, a woman, a kid, a bike, a delivery guy, a mailman.
Yeah.
So dogs, what they do is they generalize fear very quickly because it's a survival mechanism. They cannot risk getting caught off guard in scary situations. So the generalization of fear is very, very quick, very hard to undo. And so some of these methods, they might suppress what you can observe. Like you might stop your dog from growling by shocking it, absolutely. But you're not stopping any of the underlying emotional condition, and you are probably creating what I kind of paraphrase as shaken soda bottle syndrome. So like basically you've got a bottle of soda that's ready to explode, only this one has teeth. So that's really not as fun. Yeah. Yeah, so that's kind of the equivalent. You're actually starting to stimulate more negative emotional responses when you add these to the training.
Yeah, and I know our veterinary behaviorist said that it was a lot of times you're teaching them to suppress their warning signs.
You
So
are.
they go right to Jump Street and they're ready to bite, where they
Yep.
usually would growl, snarl, show their teeth, and then it would escalate. They just skip all of that because you've taught them to suppress it.
Yeah, and even before that, I had a very interesting conversation with a woman today who has a dog that's behaving a little bit unpredictably, and I use that word very sparingly. I think that a lot of people think their dogs are unpredictable, but when we actually kind of get a handle on what's happening, they are able to predict it better.
Mm-hmm.
This guy's a little bit more unpredictable. So there is a ladder, they call it the ladder of aggression. And basically, it starts with dogs doing what I think we would evaluate as kind of subtle, benign behaviors. But for dogs, they're trying to be very clear well before the growl happens about their discomfort
Mm-hmm.
in the situation. So if you and this is one of my more favorite ones. If you're approaching somebody on the street and somebody says, "Can I say hi to your dog?" and your dog does not move forward naturally to engage with that person, that's not a coincidence. That's not a small thing, and it's not happening for no reason. They
Mm-hmm.
don't want to move forward.
Right.
So when we see a dog not wanting to move forward, or turning their head away, or looking at the ground, or licking their lips, those are the signs that your dog is not comfortable with what's happening. Now, your dog might be able to get comfortable in a couple of minutes with a few tossed treats, and they might want to then go greet that person. But some dogs might turn around and face the other direction, right?
Yep.
And so our inclination, I think a lot of the times, at least from what I see, is you're okay. That person is safe. You can go say hi. Let's go say hi. And they bring the dog over, and that's when you start to see stiffening, rounded eyes, dilated pupils,
Yep.
tail tucked or tail high. And now we're 1 second away from hearing the growl.
Mm-hmm.
And then the dog growls, and more often than not, the dog gets corrected. Hey, what are you doing? Be nice. The dog's like, I don't know what you're saying. Just get me away from this person, right? So we move from those, what I like to call quiet body language indicators that your dog is stressed.
Mm-hmm.
And when we don't listen to the quiet ones, the dogs turn up the volume on the message.
Mm-hmm.
And turning up that volume is now growling, snarling, teeth baring, teeth flashing, snapping.
Mm-hmm.
And then if that doesn't work, then we're up to biting. So to your original question, when we start to correct, punish, or react negatively to all of the ways that they're just trying to communicate a feeling, they will stop offering those behaviors. But at some point, your dog's going to pop off, and it's going to try a behavior that is next on the ladder of aggression, most likely that hasn't been punished yet. And if you punish all the way up through the growl, now you're looking at a snarl, snap, bite.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
With, by the way, very subtle warnings, because they will start to mitigate those warnings so they don't get punished, and then it'll be over.
Right. Right. And going back to the beginning of your story, I wish everyone in the world would ask before approaching your dog.
Please.
That makes me crazy. I mean, we have one that's unpredictable in certain environments, and we have a do not pet leash and all these things, and people still just walk right up, and I'm like, no, don't pet her. Oh, no, I'm great with dogs. I'm like, that's great for you, but she's not.
Yep.
That type of thing.
Yeah, I'm working on a t-shirt project because I realize that the reason that those things are not working is because the dog is wearing them and not the human.
True.
Yep. So I'm working on t-shirts that say, dog in training, do not approach.
Yep.
Just wear it loud and proud, guys. It's okay.
Well, part of what with we, as you know, we're muzzle training Addie so that we can handle her and whatnot. But I fully plan on taking her on walks, put it on, because I think that would just terrorize people and keep them away.
It does. Yeah.
So that they won't approach.
It's an upside to muzzle training, but it's like also attached to people's downside for muzzle training. They're like, well, I don't want my dog to think that, I don't want people to think my dog is mean. And it's like, well, but adding a muzzle to your dog's life will allow you to train more confidently, We'll give people the visual indication that your dog struggles in some areas, and so maybe space is what's needed, right? So it gives them that. But I also want to say clearly that, you know, we need to also pay attention to the role of the muzzle, now that we're talking about it. So the role of the muzzle is not to prevent your dog from biting while we put them in situations that they're not ready for, right? The role of the muzzle is for us to engage in a training session with the comfort and the reassurance that if that training session, if something goes wrong, that we have a moment to get the dog out of there before anybody gets hurt.
Right.
And if anybody thinks that they have the ability to move their dog out of a situation where it intends to bite, I will tell you that a dog can bite 3 times in a second, which is 3 times more than your ability to respond. So by the time you've responded, that dog could land 3 bites with pretty significant damage before you're even ready to make a move.
Right.
So there is nobody on the planet who is fast enough to this date to stop a dog from biting if they, one, have access and they've already made that decision.
Yep. Now, have you ever had, I'm sure you have, but dogs that are just beyond help, whether it, I know you hear the term rage syndrome thrown around, things like that. Well, I'm not sure how real that is, that you can speak to that, but is there just a dogs that just, you can't bring them back? They're not safe. It's not a safe world for them because of it.
Unfortunately, the answer is yes. And so the reason that I kind of wince when I answer the question is because I think there are a lot of factors that lead up to making that decision. And I often get the question like, okay, well, if you're talking behavior euthanasia, why wouldn't you use a shock collar to save the dog's life, right? So we get into that conversation. The reason is that that shock collar will deteriorate quality of life. And so what you're basically doing, it's like, I think it's kind of the equivalent of like keeping somebody alive on life support. Like, you're keeping the person alive, you're adding days to their life, but there's no quality there. And so if you're going to shock your dog every day because they have panic attacks every day and they try to bite your kid every day, then the quality of life issue is a really huge concern. So I think that a lot of times quality of life is where I like to start, because if that dog, one, let's say that dog has no circle of trust. It's one of my first questions that I ask owners. Circle of trust is anybody that can interact with that dog safely with minimal amounts of management. Not none, right? We all have dogs that might bite a family member in a certain situation. You guys are, kind of helping Addie along with that.
I may not falter, really.
Right.
There's certain family members.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So then that's the other key is what does the support system look like? What is the ability to manage the dog look like? So when we talk about whether or not a dog is not able to get help, not able to modify behaviors because of some massive trauma or a massive trauma on top of being born to unsocialized parents. Like, you take a semi-feral dog and you bring them up from the south to the north, they have a traumatic experience. Like, that's really hard work. And so not every dog is able to be saved. You cannot save them all. And I don't believe that we will ever truly be a no-kill culture, because dogs will be born with problems, they will have traumas, they will be dangerous, right? So what we're shooting for is, how many dogs can we help sustain a high quality of life while being good, safe family pets, right? So that question has so many facets and components. So you might take a dog like Addie, who may have landed in a different environment, a different home. Maybe she got adopted when she was really young and there were kids in the house and like all this stuff. So there's like conditions that you're looking at that start to help you refine that question. Can the dog live safely? Can this particular dog have quality of life? So like, it all depends on what the dog's needs are, right? So if you have a dog that is absolutely content to live in a house, walk twice a day at 4 o'clock in the morning, at 10 o'clock at night, and you have people who are willing to do that, and they can be conditioned to stay in a space calmly when people are visiting, or the people have low social needs, they don't have people over a lot. You know, it's all really about how all of these variables come together to paint this picture. And then you have to decide whether this picture is sustainable or reasonable. And if it's not, the very difficult thing now is that we have so many dogs in need of homes that have benign behavior issues, that if you have a dog that is, you know, been to a trainer, a behavior consultant, a behaviorist, a behavior vet, we've tried 6 different medications, and he's still biting people in the home multiple times a week with significant damage, I think everybody would agree that's not a safe situation.
Right.
So that's where we have to talk about, is behavior euthanasia the kindest thing that we can do for the dog, but also the people who live with the dog. So if you really haven't had the experience of living with a truly dangerous dog, I think it's easy to maybe judge that decision. I think it might be easy to not understand why people are not doing more. I think if you're curious about it, it's best to ask these people questions about what they're dealing with and how they're trying to live with these animals, as opposed to, you know, and it's all over social media, I would never euthanize my dog. Okay. Yeah. Well, you have not lived with a dog who sent you to the hospital to get 12 stitches because you walked by his food bowl.
Right.
When you live with a dog like that, I think that compassion and empathy start to come to the forefront, because you know how difficult that is. Nobody gets a dog to live in fear of it.
Correct. And one thing that frustrates me, you know, I have a little different role in that I volunteer at the shelter, and I see folks who adopt and I see dogs come back, is they'll say, oh, the dog snapped at me. And I'll say, well, did you try training? You know, did you consult your vet? No, I don't want to have to do all that. And that's when I get a little frustrated, because you volunteered to take that animal in. That's a family member. You know, you need to put that effort in. It may not work out, and that's okay. None of us know that, but a little bit of effort goes a long way.
Sure. And I think that's true. I think that when you see situations like that and you kind of like assess the situation as the person not putting in the effort, there's a couple of things around that. Is if that person is feeling truly overwhelmed with a dog that may have justifiably snapped at somebody, it's probably not a great place for the dog anyway, right? I think that particular dog being returned has a different opportunity to try to find a better place. Now, I understand that adoption probability with dogs that have bite histories or aggression or snapping or any of these things that
Very
are
low.
aberrant to us are very low.
Yeah.
But if the person is not committed to trying, you know, it's probably not gonna work anyway. And
True.
also the dog might actually be very vulnerable to mishandling. Because sometimes if a person thinks, okay, well, I just have to get this behavior, like I get a lot of forms where the owners are like, we just need to fix this. Yeah.
If in a perfect world.
Yes, and I said I would love to fix it for you. There is nothing I would rather do than fix all of your dogs so everybody can live harmoniously together. Like that is my dream.
Right.
That's not the reality.
Right.
And so behavior issues, like we said, are so complex. They will respond to different levels of modification, and the goal is to get the dog to have new coping skills so that, again, they can be safe and live in a fairly free environment and get the things that they need to be happy, right? There's nothing worse than having a dog with a behavior issue where we're having difficulties modifying it and they end up isolated. Like that is a really bad thing. Right. Isolation is not the same as separation, and it's not the same as working with the dog. And isolation as a management strategy is typically very short-lived and ends up making the dog worse.
Correct.
So that's another thing that we have to think about, is how do we then first train the dog to just relax when nothing's going on? And there are some dogs that can't do that either. I mean, there's dogs with compulsive disorders, there's dogs with generalized anxiety disorders where you work on one thing and then the anxiety in the other area kicks up a notch. And, you know, there are these like it's like playing pin the tail with the dog on the donkey with some of these dogs.
Right.
So you deal with the separation anxiety, and now they won't leave the house because landscapers are in the yard, and then you deal with that, and now they won't get in the car because
I just
something.
like to think it just creates every day into an adventure. At least that's how we look at it in the house.
It does. And I think Addie has a great quality of life. I think that,
We
there are
try.
dogs, yeah, there are dogs that their quality of life is impacted by their inability to cope with fear, anxiety, and stress.
Mm-hmm.
Those dogs are the heartbreakers because they're not necessarily aggressive. They're just
scared.
They're
Yeah.
suffering, and they're suffering every day. The worst case that I had, or one of the worst cases that I had of generalized anxiety, is this dog couldn't walk in the neighborhood if there were noises.
Mm-hmm.
Couldn't walk in the neighborhood if there were any landscapers around. Couldn't walk in the neighborhood if she saw a delivery truck. She would slip her collar and run back to the house. She couldn't get in a car without panting, shaking, drooling, and vomiting.
Yep.
And she had separation anxiety.
Yeah. And I mean, we, Addie's now medicated and we're working on a right combination, but we still, the other day ran all the way home because God forbid there was a 5-year-old in the yard next door that just the sight of it traumatized her. Child didn't make a noise. Child didn't approach.
Yep.
She's currently now afraid of my son if his hair is wet. He comes out of the shower, all of a sudden she's terrified and run away. So it's every day is an adventure with a dog with anxiety, but it's just letting, not, correcting them. Just, okay, it'll be okay. Letting them, and she then approaches slowly and it's okay. But it's amazing to me the things that a dog can be afraid of.
Yes. And sometimes actually what the dog is afraid of is novelty.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So
that's her.
Anything they haven't seen before, it's like DEFCON 5.
Yep.
Like I just get. And so some dogs, I mean, dogs tend to be neophobes anyway because of that survival instinct. If there's something that they don't have a reference point for, their first response is going to be to keep distance, be a little fearful because that chair that just showed up where it wasn't yesterday might kill me.
Yeah.
I don't know. So in order to really work with the dog, so like my lab, pretty solid dog, very friendly, gets along with other dogs, a joy to live with. She's got a great recall. She's just beautiful. I have nothing bad to say about Butter. That said, every once in a while, if we move something in the backyard and she wakes up in the morning and goes out to go to the bathroom, she will stop. She will stare at it. Like, not only has she never seen it before, but it's got fangs and it is truly going to kill her.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Okay. So we go out. I go up to the thing. I move the thing over. She looks. I toss her some food. She's like, oh, yeah, okay, all right, yeah, all right, right. She'll come over. Closer she gets, the more food she gets. Then she sniffs the thing, and then we go on our walk, and we're fine.
Right.
So, and that doesn't happen very often. It might happen a couple times a year where she freaks out about something like that. But it really is about what you described. It's having the skill set to be like, oh, she's never seen my son in that outfit with that wet hair coming down those stairs in that moment. So let me just give her a minute to help her kind of acclimate to that and reinforce any behaviors that look like calm or curiosity or anything that looks like moving forward, and give her every opportunity to run away. However, if she runs away, we take out our little journal and be like, afraid of son with wet hair and this t-shirt coming down the stairs at this time of the day. And then we're like, okay, if it happens again, if it happens once, it can be a coincidence, right? She could be just like, oh, that just freaked me out on this day, but it doesn't really bother me on a regular basis. If we do it twice, it could be like, all right, well, 1 is an event, 2 is a coincidence. If it happens 3 times, you've got a pattern. And now we got to start addressing it kind of like right away. So if that rule of 3 applied, I think that a lot more people would be trying to like understand and work on things a lot sooner. Like I get a lot of clients who would be like, yeah, well, my dog's 10. I'm like, well, how long has he been doing this? 8 years. I'm like, okay, well, I don't know. Like,
it was okay for the first 8.
I know. So like, what's changed? And also, after the dog's been practicing that for 8, you know how good you are at things you practice for 8 years.
Yep.
Dogs get very good at this stuff, but they've been practicing for 8 years.
Yep. So, I mean, it's always incredible. I mean, we've had days where we're afraid of the front door. Like she just won't go out the front door, but you kind of laugh about it and move on with the day. And I think you kind of have to get used to that. So before we wrap it up, anything that you want to make sure that we get out there and create knowledge and understanding of what it is that you do?
Yes. So we have been working very hard at keeping our website
Mhm.
pretty robust. And also, we are trying to keep up with social media. It's very difficult because our team is incredibly busy. I think that everybody knows that dog services are getting a little bit squeezed post-COVID.
Mhm.
We definitely have a shortage of professionals doing this work, and we have an abundance of dogs that need the work.
Yep.
So we do have a good amount of information on our website, and we are constantly trying to like update and add resources. It's also a perfect way to get in touch with me. So there is a very quick contact form on the homepage.
Mhm.
And the website is cooperationcanine.com, and it's all spelt out, no funny K's and nines and all that, just 2 words, all spelt out. So there's that. And then we are on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. And again, we are trying to mix up the content. It's a little bit fun. I am also trying to do content that is really helpful.
Mhm.
And there's also a blog that we're obviously trying to keep up. It's a lot of content to keep up with, especially when you're, kind of seeing this many dogs.
Yep.
But it is a good way to engage. I do have a person who handles the social media for us, so she is available, and she's great with engagement, direct messaging, and all that stuff. So if anybody wants to check us out, I would say check out our social media feeds, hop over to the website. If you have any questions, fill out your quick contact form. If you do have a dog in need and you are more serious about moving forward with some work, there is a getting started section, and in that there's a new client profile where we just basically try to take some introductory information so we can kind of triage the case and get people to where they need to go in the turnaround times that are appropriate for the cases that we get. So that's a good place to check us out too.
And I encourage everyone to go on YouTube and watch some of their training videos. You're amazing at breaking things down to the smallest increment. I'm a big picture person, so I struggle with that.
Yeah,
And you've taught us very well and where we need to start and where we need to go
great.
and getting there. And it's a patience game if you're the
It
one
is.
doing the training.
Mhm.
But I will say it pays off 100%. And we couldn't be happier that we found you, Erika, going down our rabbit hole of craziness with our dogs. So I'm glad you're here on that journey for us.
I'm glad to be here. I think you guys are doing an amazing job, and
Thank you.
Addie's amazing. She's an incredibly special dog. I know she has her struggles, and I think that watching you guys and seeing how much you love her and just accepting her. So I think there's this other part, and I'd love to close with this. There is a point where you accept your dog for who they are,
Mhm.
and you help them get better. And if they can make incremental progress, that's great, but it
Yeah.
doesn't actually change how much you love them. And I think that that kind of attitude moving forward, like, again, as long as the dog is moderately safe and has a good quality of life and you can move forward that way, that's fine. I do understand that there are people who are living with dogs that are truly dangerous, truly scary, targeting the people in the home that they live with, which can be very traumatic.
Mhm.
So I don't want to minimize that. I'm not saying that if you can't work with your dog or you opt not to move forward with your dog, that you don't love your dog. I don't believe that for a second. I
Right.
think every single person watching this and every single person that I help, the one thing that everybody has in common is they love their dog. They might
Yep.
be afraid of their dog. They might be afraid of what their dog is going to do to another dog or another person, but they all love their dogs.
Yeah. And I encourage anybody in that situation. We found ourselves there along the way that reach out, have that conversation with Erika, because once you see the behaviors for what they are, they're easier to manage. But until then, you're just afraid. And that's a hard place to come from.
I think that's a
Um,
great point. I think
yeah.
that understanding can tamp down some of that fear.
Yeah, absolutely. Because then at least you know how to manage it. It's a little more predictable. So,
Yeah.
again, if you're looking to get in contact with her, reach out to cooperationcanine.com. Her and her team, I know I've worked with Erika and Sam, they're great. She's been in business over 10 years and looking to expand soon. So, I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
And again, please reach out to her. It's amazing. And you'll be able to have a much better existence with your dog, especially if you've been blessed with a special dog. So,
Let's hear
thanks
it for the
again.
special dogs.
And thank you for listening. I'm Nancy Duncan from Duncan Hears, and y'all have a great day.